The people that are saying this is clearly bull, these charges are clearly bull, don't know all because they have no clue what the evidence that's currently being said on is. None of them know. They're talking out their ass. James Comey situation. Absolutely a good sign that they indicted James Comey. It's difficult to find information from sort of grand juries because by their very nature, they're supposed to be secretive. However, scuttlebutt that I'm reading suggests that I think they had 24 people on the grand jury and maybe 14 of them voted for these two charges. Now, that's not necessarily a good sign. However, when you factor in that it's in one of the most liberal districts in the country, probably a good sign that you even found one person that was willing to pursue charges. So, some people I trust that are looking at these charges are weighing in and saying that it's going to be an uphill battle, and it may be. However, I think there's more to the story. Now, the question is, did he lie? Lying is very difficult to prove because it speaks to knowing the intent behind the person. Now, this didn't stop Democrats from aggressively using lawfare to get guilty pleas and to go after people and bruise their life that were connected to Trump. For example, we went through Michael Flynn's 302, which, by the way, there are all sorts of problems with that 302 anyways. They came in late, they were adjusted at points. And if you don't know what a 302 is, our system is so corrupt that in a day and age where we all have one of these, a phone with a camera on it, did you know the FBI does not record their interviews? Instead, agents write down notes afterwards. So it becomes their word versus the person that testified, or the person they were interviewing. So Flynn still claims that the 302 was wrong. Nonetheless, there's a question as to whether or not these charges will stick. Again, the charges themselves were the punishment against Trump-connected people. And the truth that no one wants to admit that's on the left is, as long as these trials occur in these districts, there's going to be an overwhelming propensity to charge people that are considered close to Trump or connected to Trump, and an overwhelming propensity to find those innocent that are opposed to Trump. What the fuck? I can't talk today. That's going to be what's likely to occur. But it doesn't matter if they get a conviction or not. What matters is whether or not they're able to bring the charges, because the charges themselves are incredibly damaging to most people. The fact that we saw people in a grand jury that were willing to recommend bringing the charges, that itself shows that it's worthy to bring these charges and let a jury decide. I think there's more going on here, though, the more I read to this. I think there's likely, and we talked about this last night a little, John Solomon was reporting this, there's likely to be more charges coming down. And this is almost like a placeholder charge. In other words, I think there will be more people indicted as to this sort of grand conspiracy in order to stop Trump from winning and to negatively affect his administration. And I think it will be more charges against Comey and charges against other people. We'll have to see whether or not these charges end up even being important by the time that all of the cases are filed. Now, maybe this will be it. We don't know. All we know right now is that this is the charge that's been filed against James Comey. There's reporting that there will be further charges, at least for other people, and I would also anticipate probably for James Comey. The question is it easy to prove that someone lied? Now, the standard is set forth by the Democrats, completely reasonable to bring charges like this. Completely reasonable. And you see it every time that I debate Democrats. We understand what Trump was thinking. He's the worst, blah, blah, blah. Yep, we know exactly what he was thinking. And then when we look at Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden's quid pro quo, or, well, we don't know. We don't know. Like Comey, we don't really know what he was thinking. So that's where we'll be. Last night, I read some of the files from Arctic Haze. Was that the name of it? The file that was put through, right? But I got some more today. So first, what I want to do is show you again, basically the comments that Comey's going to be charged for. This is him lying basically to Chuck Grassley.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No. I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Okay, now remember that. Okay, that's number one. Now next, let's look at the indictment itself. One of the people that I'm following with this is a guy by the name of Shipwreck Crew. Shipwreck Crew's MAGA, he definitely is, but he also is less extreme. Like, he'll call out like, I don't think this is a slam dunk people were suggesting. So he'll definitely be on that side of things. False statements with the jurisdiction of the legislative branch of the United States on or about September 30th, 2020. In the Eastern District of Virginia, the defendant James Comey did willfully and knowingly make a materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statement in a matter within the jurisdiction of the legislative branch of the U.S. government, in other words, in front of Congress, by falsely stating to a U.S. senator during a Senate Judiciary Committee that he, James Comey Jr., had not authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news report regarding an FBI investigation concerning person 1. Statement's false because Comey Jr. then and there knew he'd in fact authorized person 3 to serve as an anonymous source in news reporting regarding an FBI investigation into person 1. Now, here's the problem. Let's go back and listen to this again.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Okay. Notice he says the Trump investigation or the Hillary investigation. Did you ask anyone at the FBI to be an anonymous source for the Trump investigation or the Hillary investigation to the media? Okay, now listen.
I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Now, let's go back to this. I'm being told, at least what I'm reading from people like Shipwreck Crew, that the investigation concerning person 1 is Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump. Let me repeat that. Person 1 being an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation concerning person 1 is Hillary Clinton. So when you heard Comey, if that's true, and I can't prove that, but if that's true, the second part of that, where you hear Comey talking about his buddy, who we'll later find out is this guy Richmond, that he was telling to disclose stuff to the media, was about Trump, not about Hillary Clinton. Is it the Cruz question that he's being charged with? Well, let's see that one, just to be safe. Eric Doherty says it was the Cruz question, but I don't know. So let's listen to Cruz's question.
On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? You responded under oath, quote, never. He then asked you, quote, have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? You responded again under oath, no. Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
All right, I'm going to make a final point because my time has expired. This investigation of the president was corrupt. The FBI and the Department
Now, I would say that it's likely that that is true, that it's this exchange that he's being indicted for, because my guess is the 2017 exchange is probably beyond the statute of limitations at this point. In that he's specifically saying McCabe, right? So this furthers the point I was saying. Now, one, if you listen to this exchange again, because I have a question.
For the Clinton investigation, you responded under oath, quote, never.
This part.
He then asked you, quote, have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? You responded again under oath, no.
Okay. Now, what I want you to consider is this. Ted Cruz is going to make this about Andy McCabe. When James Comey says, I stand behind that testimony, does that mean that he stands behind the testimony just in regards to the McCabe statement, or that he stands behind it in totality, which means that he didn't give us anyone to be a source? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because let's assume there's this guy out there, Richmond, that worked for the FBI. And let's assume that second clip that we heard next to the Chuck Grassley statement, where Comey says, basically, yeah, I told my friend to leak to the press so that we could get to a special counsel. If we accept that, that shows that Comey lied, but that's beyond the statute of limitations, and we're only talking about him now talking to Ted Cruz, did he still lie about that now, or is he only talking about McCabe?
Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
Now, to me, that would mean he stands by the entirety of the statement, which would mean not just that McCabe isn't the source, but that he didn't share this with anyone. In other words, if that statement is a lie, by repeating the lie to Congress now within the statute of limitation, he could be charged with it. But fair enough. The point I was trying to make in this clip where he's explaining,
I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
that's him talking about Richmond, not about McCabe. And that's talking about the Trump investigation, not the Hillary one. McCabe is talking about the Hillary investigation. And it seems that that's what the charge is. So given that, if we look again at the charging document, he's charged with not having someone else at the FBI be an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation into person one who appears to be Hillary Clinton. In other words, based on this indictment, if James Comey lied about being the source or having an FBI agent be the source of any of the details about the investigation into Donald Trump, he's not being charged with that. So it's an interesting sort of, the Richmond thing doesn't seem to be relevant right now. The other problem with Richmond, with what he says there is, Richmond was a special government employee working with the FBI, but does that qualify under what Grassley asks?
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump?
Someone else at the FBI. Is there a claim to be made that Richmond wasn't someone at the FBI? If he was just a special government employee for the FBI? I don't know. Now, it's no doubt what James Comey is doing here in front of Grassley and them is being incredibly fucking slippery. Because he'll later admit, yeah, I told a guy to leak to the press regarding Trump. But the technical aspect of the indictment will matter. So I only make this point to say this. It appears, based on my best reading of the indictment, at this point, it is likely that this is specifically talking about person one is Hillary Clinton and person three is Andy McCabe. So when it says the statement is false because James Comey Jr. then and there knew he in fact authorized Andy McCabe to serve as an anonymous source in news reporting regarding the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton. If that's the indictment, it would not matter. It would not matter if he told John Smithenstein to be an anonymous source to the media over the investigation into Donald Trump, and he lied about that. It would be irrelevant because he's not being charged with that right now. Does everyone understand that? In other words, if you could prove that he lied about 50 other things, but the government doesn't bring charges, those lies won't matter. So they'll have to bring those charges. Now, I don't know exactly. I've heard rumors that some of that conversation with Ted Cruz that the statute of limitation may be running out soon. Now, this may be what they're calling a placeholder charge. In other words, they're getting the charge on paper and they plan to build more upon this and offer more charges later. Maybe that's what's occurring. It could be that Andy McCabe's testimony alone is enough to sink him. In fact, perhaps it was enough to sink him with the grand jury, which is why they recommended bringing charges. In other words, Andy McCabe may go in and say, yeah, he told me that, in which case that's solid evidence. But it could come down to a he said, she said thing. Or it could be that the government has more evidence that we've yet to see. So for example, McCabe might say, he already testified, sure, Comey told me this. And everyone's looking at it going, nah, wait a minute. That could have been a misunderstanding, blah, blah, blah. But maybe they've later done research and found a text message from Comey saying, yes, McCabe, do this. Or an email. Could be. Maybe not, but it could be. But the people that are out there saying this is clearly a bullshit, bogus charge, they don't fucking know. They don't know. They don't know what the government has. If they merely have the testimony of McCabe, and McCabe saying, yes, he told me to do this, and that may be enough to bring the charge, but it might not be enough to convict for a jury. We don't know right now. Now, the standard had been lowered so bad, going after Trump and company, I don't give a fuck. I'm glad that they indicted him. And the fact that a grand jury, if they would have indicted somehow against the wishes of a grand jury, then I would say that's too much. But the fact that this was done through a legal procedure, that the grand jury said that it was worth bringing charges, absolutely bring the charges. It may also serve as a signal to other people that are going to be charged in the future, we're not fucking around, so you better start cooperating now. Because the last person that cooperates, gonna get the harshest deal. One of the comments that you're seeing is sort of, well, the indictment's very thin from the National Review. Says it's flawed, says it's thin. The perjury count appears deeply flawed. The charge is difficult to decipher because it's not merely terse, but it's scant in its description of what Comey allegedly lied about. Seems to relate to former FBI Director McCabe's October 2016 leak to the Wall Street Journal of information about the Bureau's then ongoing Clinton Foundation investigation. That's discernible because the indictment quotes a senator as having asked Comey if someone authorized someone else at the FBI as the anonymous source of the news report about the Clinton or Trump investigation. Searching the transcript, the senator quoted as Ted Cruz. Comey maintained he'd never authorized McCabe to leak. Cruz pointed out McCabe claimed the Justice Department investigators that Comey knew about the leak. McCabe did indeed make that claim. Cruz further interjected in his question, McCabe said Comey directly authorized. In this, Cruz distorted McCabe's version of the event, which McCabe himself authorized the leak. The conflict between McCabe and Comey's versions involved what McCabe told Comey and how Comey reacted. For purposes of this indictment, however, that's besides the point. The perjury count alleged that Comey falsely denied authorizing the leak, but McCabe, who admittedly said he authorized the leak, never claimed that Comey authorized it. Comey cannot legitimately be convicted, absent proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he truly believed he himself authorized the leak, that he did authorize the leak, and that therefore he intentionally lied. Where's the evidence? There's none we can see. There is, however, a great deal of evidence corroborating Comey's account. It's outlined painstakingly by Horowitz. Remember, Horowitz was no fan of Comey. Bullshit. Having issued a number of withering reports. Yeah, but always stuff. That's like saying Comey wasn't a fan of Hillary because he gave scathing reports. Sure. Assuming the perjury starts about the Clinton Foundation leak, McCabe would appear to be the central witness. That would be problematic for the government if it were to be a trial. Prosecutors never get a trial unless they are clearly alleged wrongdoing. Halligan apparently tried to convince the grand jury that Comey also lied to the same committee hearing by denying he'd been informed in 2016 that Hillary Clinton was behind the smear that Trump was colluding with the Kremlin. Yet as the transcript elucidates, what Comey said was that he could not recall the FBI getting a criminal referral but the matter from the CIA. Putting aside that there's no indication of falsity in Comey's claims to not remember such a thing. In reality, there was no criminal referral. Let's go back, though, and see what was said to Grassley that Comey's saying that he stands behind the testimony, shall we?
To the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump?
So did he authorize someone else to be a source? The National Review is saying is McCabe, who admitted to authorizing the leak, never claimed Comey authorized it, only that Comey knew about it. That's the argument, and that's what's going to be argued. Comey's going to say, I didn't authorize it. McCabe authorized it. I knew about it. He told me he was going to do it. I said, okay, but I didn't authorize it. If Comey knew before the leak occurred that McCabe authorized it, by default, seeing as how Comey was his boss, the fact that he didn't try to intervene could be a tacit authorization. For example, if Comey's the head boss and McCabe says, hey, I told this guy to leak to the New York Times, and Comey's like, okay, good. Doesn't that kind of mean that Comey authorized it? But if McCabe didn't tell Comey until after it was leaked to the New York Times, then Comey didn't authorize it. He may not have punished after it was done, but I'm just trying to be as fair as possible. The National Review there is basically making the claim that this indictment's written like shit, that there's not a lot of evidence. Shipwreck Kuru, who's admitting that this will be hard to prove, is pushing back here. He says an indictment is a notice pleading to serve the purpose of providing the defendant notice of what he is charged with. It need not be chapter and verse specific in its details. The indictment is read in light of the discovery provided to the defense. In the discovery is where we would expect to find specific details. Just because the public reading the indictment does not have all of its questions answered without access to the discovery does not mean the indictment is defective. There will be witness statements and testimony under oath in front of the grand jury that provides to the defense the very specific information that the NRO editors complain is left out, National Review. They take a cheap shot at acting U.S. attorney and note her lack of federal criminal trial experience. But do the editors truly believe that the language in this indictment was not signed off by senior DOJ attorneys with years of decades of criminal trial experience, beginning with Deputy AG Todd Blanche? Surprising lack of understanding of how federal criminal practice and procedure. What Super Crew's saying here is like, look, yes, it's true that some of the indictments against Trump were fucking huge and spelled a bunch of shit out. But he's like, that's not necessarily what an indictment has to do. That's what the discovery process is for the defense. The defense has the right to see the evidence that will be used against them. But that's not what's necessary in an indictment. So he's saying it's fine to have a terse indictment. So the question is there more evidence, or is it merely the testimony we've already seen from Andy McCabe? Or did Andy McCabe say other things in other areas? Or is it just Andy McCabe? It doesn't say when you read statement 2. The statement is false, or part 2. Statement's false because Comey then and there knew he in fact authorized McCabe to serve as an anonymous source in news reporting regarding an FBI investigation concerning person 1. That doesn't mean that McCabe's the one who told the FBI that, or that told the people indicting that. There could be someone else. Now, here's the document we read yesterday from Arctic Haze. This was released recently. Investigators learned that the FBI Office of Public Affairs, the OPA, was told to assist the New York Times with the April 2017 article. According to interviews with FBI employees, this is the key word, employees, multiple. Comey either directed or otherwise authorized the FBI's official assistance to the New York Times. They didn't go to Lynch or the other places for it. So according to this document, seeing as how it's saying that they were employees multiple, that implies more than just Andy McCabe. Now, this sounds confusing, but let's rehash what's going on. It appears as if the charge is about lying about whether or not he authorized a leak to the New York Times about the Hillary Clinton case. That leak went through Andy McCabe. That's what we're being told. The argument against the indictment is, but listen, if all they have is the McCabe testimony is sort of being mischaracterized by Ted Cruz. Because he doesn't say that Comey authorized it, merely that Comey knew about it at some point. Therefore, that's not going to be enough because you need to prove the following things. You need to prove that he did actually authorize it, Comey, and that he knowingly lied about it. So therefore, if he only knew about it but didn't authorize it, he didn't lie. However, the evidence seems to suggest that it's not just the testimony of Andy McCabe, because it says, according to interviews with FBI employees, i.e. multiple people at the FBI, Comey either directed, which would mean an authorization, or otherwise authorized FBI's official assistance to the New York Times. Now, this was written by an FBI report into the matter in 2021. So the key takeaway here is charges seem legit. Whether or not they will stick, we'll see. But the fact that a grand jury accepted it strongly suggests that they're legit. It seems that the Arctic Haze memo says multiple FBI employees said that Comey authorized this or otherwise instructed them. This would prove that he lied about this specifically. However, to push back, there's controversy about the testimony of McCabe and the idea of Richmond, a leak to the press about the Trump investigation, is nowhere included in this indictment. There's a high likelihood that there are more charges likely to come and that this could be a placeholder investigation. And lastly, the people that are saying this is clearly bullshit, these charges are clearly bullshit, don't know fuck all because they have no clue what the evidence that's currently being said on is. None of them know. They're talking out their ass. It could well be that more charges come against Comey for lying about leaking about the Trump investigation through his friend Richmond. It does not appear that that's what this current indictment is. Lastly, although I'm going through it with you all because I give a shit about this, I think it's important that you know as many details as you can about it. But anyone on the left that cheered against the lawfare against Donald Trump could fuck right off. This charge is good. It's true. Comey is a slimeball that engaged in the most egregious behavior in their coup against Donald Trump, whether you want to call it a coup, whether you want to call it sort of using legal mechanisms to try to harm Donald Trump, whatever term you want to use. And turnabout's fair play. These people did not give a fuck when Comey's FBI illegally spied on Trump. So fuck them. That's my feelings on the matter.